Hello again and welcome to the Scoring from the 50 podcast. Today we will be talking about my new top 25 after week 2 and reviewing all the games that I made a prediction for last week before week 2. Let's get right into it. My top 25, Georgia and Michigan right at the top staying the same, but Florida State's up to 3 after Alabama fell. We'll get to them in just a second. Texas is up to 4 plus 7 after a huge win over Alabama. Penn State, Ohio State, USC, Tennessee, Washington, all staying the same at 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Alabama dropped 7 spots down to 10. I dropped LSU down 4. I looked at LSU and where I put them in my last rankings, and I think I looked at Alabama and was like, they all looked worse than all these teams, so they're going to fall. But LSU looked even worse than Alabama, so I put LSU below Alabama. Alabama just above LSU, below Washington, Tennessee, USC, as I just mentioned. Notre Dame's up 1 spot to number 12. Utah's down 1 spot to 13. Oregon down 1 to 14. And then it stays the same from 15 all the way to 18. And then at 19, Ole Miss moved up 3 spots. Iowa's up another spot. Tulane is down 1 spot to 21. Colorado's up 3 spots to 22. Duke and Clemson staying the same. And then Miami is at 25 after a huge win against Texas A&M. Wisconsin is the only one to drop out of my top 25. Now, I'm going to talk about Texas and Texas only because that's the only really big mover. They played so good against Alabama. They out-Alabamaed Alabama. They were more physical. They were faster. They played smarter. We'll get more into it towards the end of the episode, but what a performance from the Texas Longhorns. Texas is back. Okay, let's get right into reviewing my predictions. The first game was Illinois and Kansas on Friday. Jalen Daniels is healthy. He is so healthy. 277 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a 34-23 win over Illinois. I know Illinois isn't that good, but they always have a good defense. Brett Bielema always has that team clicking on defense. KU's offense looked great. 539 total offensive yards, splitting those yards, 277 yards passing and 262 yards rushing. That's the definition of a balanced offense. They're going to win a lot of games in Big 12 play if they continue to do that. For Illinois, not so great. I just told you guys, they gave up 539 total yards of offense. That's not going to do you very good. That's not going to do you any good in a very good Big Ten that has at least 3 really good offenses. Brett Bielema needs to get that defense figured out. They always have a good defense. They can't, that's their identity. They can't afford to give up that many yards, give up that many points. That's not how Illinois has won football games. Luke Altmaier with only 202 yards passing and 2 picks to only 1 touchdown won't get it done in Big Ten play. Parrott with only 139 rushing yards, and you're looking at a 1-1 team that almost lost to Toledo and got beat by KU in football. Not a great look for Illinois, but KU looks really good. Looks like they can compete in the Big 12. Moving on to Notre Dame at NC State. Got rain delayed for, an hour or 2. But Notre Dame looked really, really good. I thought before the season that Notre Dame would look good in year 3 under Marcus Freeman. I thought they'd have another average season like they did last year. Maybe 9-3. Just not a great season, but good season to keep Marcus Freeman's job. And then year 3, they take that next step and become a really good team. Well, it looks like they're already taking that next step. They brought in Sam Hartman, and he has been dominant. He had 286 yards and 4 touchdowns against a pretty good NC State defense in a 45-24 win, plus 170 yards rushing, and you got yourself a really, really good Notre Dame offense. That defense does have a bit to work on, giving up 24 points and 260 passing yards, but holding them to only 84 rushing yards is going to win you a lot of football games going forward. For NC State, they need to figure it out with Brennan Armstrong. 260 yards and 3 touchdowns would be amazing if you didn't throw 3 picks to go with it. You can't turn the ball over that much and expect to win games in the ACC, especially in that conference, because Clemson, besides them, has looked great. Right? Outside of Clemson, the ACC has looked like a very, very, very good conference. You know, you had Duke looking better than expected. Florida State's beating LSU. Don't sleep on the ACC. They are very good outside of Clemson. They are downwards. Not good. Not good for Clemson. But Notre Dame is the story of this game. Their offense looks really good. Their defense looks pretty good. Not great, but good enough to win a lot of football games this year. You could be looking at a 10-11 win season in the regular season for Notre Dame. Utah at Baylor. I was wrong about this game. I thought it was going to be a blowout. I also thought Cam Rising was going to be playing again. He did not. It was way too close for Utah's liking, only being 20-14. Again, Cam Rising didn't end up playing for the second straight week, but the two quarterback system did not work at all against a very, very hungry Baylor defense. They just lost to Texas State. They're fighting for their season, kind of like Texas Tech. We'll get to them in a second. But wow, did Utah struggle. They need Cam Rising back more than they need to breathe. They are missing him terribly. They only had 153 passing yards. That's fine whenever you rush for 224, but the Utes need Cam Rising back so badly. If they want to score more than 20 points, they're going to need Cam Rising back. For Baylor, I don't have a lot to say for them. They're 0-2 now with a loss to Texas State. Dave Aranda is not looking good. His seat is getting hotter by the minute. Ever since that 2021 Big 12 championship, he just flat out needs to win more games. He has not taken that program in that upward trajectory that it looked like they were going. Ever since that game, they have fallen off terribly. He's got to turn it around if he wants to keep his job. Moving on elsewhere, kind of in the Big 12, definitely in the Pac-12, because, Colorado's in the Pac-12, but they're going to the Big 12. My review for this game, I told you guys that if they won this game, my opinion would start to change. They need to prove that they can win more than once. I want to see them repeat what they did against TCU. Well, they did. They did it in a big way. Colorado won that game 36-14. Their defense played lights out. Most of the time it was a self-inflicted wound from Nebraska, but that defense looked great. They only allowed 341 total yards and 119 passing yards. That's it. 119 passing yards. That is terrible from Nebraska, but it's great for Colorado. If you can do that in the Pac-12, they won't be able to with how good those offenses are. But if they could, I'm going to let you sit there and pause. If they could do that, they can compete for a Pac-12 championship. Are you kidding me? Say they held Caleb Williams to 225 passing yards. Has that ever happened? Has Caleb Williams ever had less than that? If Colorado could do that, they might win the Pac-12 championship. I fully believe in this Colorado team. They are really good. It's going to be hard for me to pick against them going forward against whoever they play. I probably will pick against them because I think Oregon's better than them. I think USC is better than them. I think there's a lot of Pac-12 teams that are better than them just because I think the Pac-12 is really good this year. But don't sleep on those Colorado Buffaloes. They are good. Now, for Nebraska, I don't know if I even want to talk about this. It was so ugly. So ugly. It is time to make a quarterback change. Jeff Sims went 9 for 15 with 106 yards. And a pick. And 0 touchdowns. And 2 fumbles. That is complete and total incompetence at the QB position. Your defense played well enough for you to be in that game. Yes, they gave up 454 yards. But you gave your defense a couple of short fields, and boom, you're down by 2 scores. The defense feels helpless, but it's mostly your offense's fault whenever you can do that. They had 222 yards on the ground. Really, all they need is a quarterback, and Jeff Sims is not one. That's Nebraska. Sorry, I should be specific. Nebraska rushed for 222 yards on the ground, but yet they still cannot win. They still are getting blown out, and that is on Jeff Sims. No one else but Jeff Sims. I will say, if you are a Nebraska fan, you just need to calm down, okay? Matt Rule has struggled no matter where he is at in his first year, okay? Temple, Baylor, not great years his first year, right? You just got to give him time. He's not Deion Sanders, right? I talked about this in my last episode, or one of them. He's not Deion Sanders. You can't find yourself another Deion Sanders. You just can't. So please do not expect Matt Rule to come in and make a Deion Sanders level of a difference in year one, like Deion Sanders is doing. Just give him time, give him a few years. I think he'll get you guys back on track. He's a good college football coach. I promise you, just give him time. Now moving on to a happier game for some. Ole Miss traveled to Tulane and won. I was surprised by that. I was feeling really good about my pick. I picked Tulane to win until I didn't, and Ole Miss started coming back. Well, Jackson Dart played great. He had 267 yards and 2 touchdowns. Only 1 pick, which is not terrible, and a 37-20 win over the Green Wave. Dart looked good. Quinshon Judkins kind of struggled. He only ran for 48 yards. Ole Miss can be a really good, really good team if they can throw the ball whenever Quinshon Judkins isn't having a great game. He is their whole offense. Quinshon Judkins is the best, if not top 3 running back in college football, right? If he's not playing good, where does that team go? Well, if they have a quarterback to turn to, they can win games. They can win games pretty easily, right? Curious to see where Ole Miss can go from here. I hope Jackson Dart can play that good like he did the other day. I hope he can play good for the rest of the season and win Ole Miss some football games. For Tulane, I don't really have much to say about them because they're a Group of 5 team. They were the only shot that the Group of 5 had to get into the college football playoff this year. Doesn't look like that's going to happen. They had to go undefeated. Had to win by a lot against Ole Miss. Just disappointing for the Group of 5, but also honestly not hard to see coming. I think they're still really good. I think they're still going to win a lot of football games this year, but just not as good as we thought. I thought they'd win that game. Thought they could move up in the rankings quite a bit, but they couldn't, and that's okay. We'll move on from that game because there's just not a lot to say about it now. Good for Ole Miss, not good for Tulane. We'll move on to another SEC game in Miami and Texas A&M. If nothing else, this game showed that neither team knows how to run the football, right? A&M ran for 97 yards in a 48-33 loss. Miami ran for 77 yards, and they scored 48 points. Miami proved the new offense under Shannon Dawson is going to work great, right? Tyler Van Dyke threw for 374 yards. He looked really good, right? He threw, again, 374 yards, 5 touchdowns, 0 picks, and one of the best QB performances of the weekend. In last week's episode, I talked about the ramifications of this game, and there will be a ton. For Mario Cristobal, he just instilled a lot of confidence into that program from the media, from the boosters, from his athletic director, from the fans. A lot of people are starting to believe in Mario Cristobal if you didn't already. I do. I believe a lot more in Mario Cristobal after winning this game. Jimbo Fisher, he should have been fired yesterday. I'm sorry, he is just not working. Texas A&M needs to fire him. I know the buyout is $70 million, and I don't think they're actually going to because of that, but they need to. He is not working. Bobby Petrino is not going to work. They need to do something to fix that program because Jimbo Fisher is incapable of it. Please get him out of there. He has had talent after talent after talent come through there, yet nothing on the field. He needs to not be coaching that team anymore. He's just not good enough. He's not good enough to coach that team. He's just not. Neither is Bobby Petrino. Neither of them should be coaching a Texas A&M football team after this year. Again, Jimbo Fisher should have been fired yesterday. He is not a good enough coach for this. He's not a good enough coach to be in the SEC. He needs to be fired as soon as possible. Now on a happier note, I want to talk about this Oregon and Texas Tech team. I thought this game would go exactly how it went. You know, I said it'd be a dogfight. I said Texas Tech is talented. I knew they were talented. They just lost to Wyoming. They're in, oh my god, we have to win or our season's pretty much over mode. They could not afford a loss, even though they did. So I'm curious to see where Texas Tech does go after losing 38-30 whenever they really should have won that game. Going into the fourth quarter, Texas Tech was 15 minutes away from a huge upset. They were up 27-18 as the fourth quarter started. Then Bo Nix started to play lights out and ended up winning 38-30, fending off a hungry Texas Tech team from a huge upset. Nix ended up finishing with 359 yards and 2 touchdowns, 0 picks. Wish I could have seen more from the run game, as Oregon only ran for 113 yards, and lead back Bucky Irving only had 38 yards. But I think Oregon might get some flack for winning this game. Barely, right? They're getting some flack. They fell a spot in my rankings, but they really shouldn't get that much flack, right? Texas Tech was a hungry team. They're in wounded animal mode. You can't really base this game off anything. Like, there's nothing to base this game off of. Oregon is good, but Texas Tech is good too. That had just lost a game they shouldn't. And they all knew that they shouldn't. So they're all mad. They're all hungry. They need to win this game, and that's why they played better. Tyler Shaw, he played okay. 282 yards, 3 touchdowns, but he had 3 picks. Kind of like Brendan Armstrong I talked about earlier. He can't turn the ball over that much. Right. He also lost a fumble. Just too many mistakes for Texas Tech to overcome against a really good Oregon team. You just can't make mistakes whenever you're trying to upset a team like that. That's not going to get the job done ever, even if you're not playing an Oregon team. 4 turnovers from your quarterback. Unacceptable. Now, moving on to the final game that I will talk about today. You all know what's coming. Texas at Alabama. Texas comes through, walks into Tuscaloosa, punches Alabama in the face, and Alabama doesn't respond. They do respond a little bit, but they really don't. I mean, wow. Who saw that coming? I mean, a lot of people, I'm sure, predicted, quote-unquote, predicted it, but those are the same people that picked Georgia to win the SEC championship in 2021, or predicted Clemson to take over the Alabama dynasty. Everyone picks them to lose, right? Because they want them to lose. They've been winning for so long, and you've seen them be weak before, and people are like, ooh, yeah, they could lose that game. They could, but it rarely happens. What happened on Saturday night, that had never happened. Nick Saban losing by double digits at home, that has never happened. It's the first out-of-conference loss for Nick Saban since Louisiana Monroe in 2007. That pause is letting you think about that. That Louisiana Monroe is who last beat Alabama in an out-of-conference game. In 2007, nonetheless. Okay, why did Texas win that game? They won the game because of Quinn Ewers. I'm just going to be honest. There weren't any bad penalties, no weird weather, just straight up they won that game because of Quinn Ewers. He played so much better than Jalen Milroe. Texas, even besides Quinn Ewers, they just out-physicaled Alabama. They outran Alabama. They outsmarted Alabama. That is the part that surprises everyone. They outsmarted Alabama. When was the last time Alabama got outsmarted? They out-Alabama'd Alabama. Quinn Ewers threw for 349 yards and 3 touchdowns. The difference between him and Jalen Milroe, Quinn Ewers didn't throw a pick, while Jalen Milroe threw 2. Milroe looked so uncomfortable the whole game. He scrambled out of the pocket as soon as the ball was snapped. He was scrambling out of the pocket, was never comfortable, never had his feet set, couldn't really get his feet under those throws, didn't look good at all. If you go back and look at the replay, right, one of those interceptions, it was a curl route to his right side. They showed a replay of it from behind him, and you can see where his eyes are, right? And he is staring down that curl route. It is the only route on that side of the field. So if you're anywhere in that vicinity, you know where the ball's going to go. You see Jalen Milroe just staring at that receiver running the curl route. As soon as his hands break to go throw that ball, the linebacker breaks on the ball. Easiest read of his life, but it was a good read. Picks it off, returns to like the 5. It was a huge body blow to Alabama. You can't do that against a good defense, which Texas Tech has. Sorry, not Texas Tech. Texas has. Alabama played terrible. Their offensive line was not as good as expected. They weren't good enough. They were out-physicaled, outplayed, outsmarted, outran. Texas won that game in every single facet of the game. There is no way you can look at any part of the game and think that Alabama actually played better than Texas. No part in that game. which is mind-blowing. Alabama doesn't lose those games. That is not the game that Alabama loses. They lose the games to LSU and Tennessee by 2 scores. Like, that's not 2 scores, by 2 points. I cannot believe that Texas won that game in the way that they did. They didn't destroy them, but they outplayed them every way you can possibly outplay a football team. I have 3 questions, right? Where does Bama go from here? Where do they go? Do they salvage their season? Can they still can make the playoff. Can they play a wild card, play a revenge team, Can they still win those games that maybe they shouldn't and make a playoff? They're expected to. They should. It's Alabama. That is the expectation of Alabama. They need to come back, win out, and make the college football playoff. Is Texas back? I think they are. I think to prove that Texas is back, they can't pull a Texas and lose to Texas Tech. Can't lose to Kansas State. If you're Texas and you want to be back, the only loss that you can afford for the rest of the season is against Oklahoma. That's it. If they lose any other game, Texas isn't back. So win those games, and I will definitively say Texas is back. The biggest question that I'm just going to ask, I'm not even going to elaborate on it. I'm not saying that this is how it is. I'm not saying that this is true, but I'm not saying that the answer is yes. Could this be the end of the Nick Saban Alabama dynasty? Thank you guys so much for listening to the Scoring from the 50 podcast. It means so much to me whenever you guys do. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Follow if you're listening to Apple Podcast. I want to thank you guys again so much for listening, and I will talk to you guys again on Thursday to preview the Week 3 games. Not a great week of football, but we're still going to talk about a few big games, and I will see you guys then.